Namaskar. Welcome to Daily Global Insights with Sree and Sree. This is episode number 184. Today is June 17th, Thursday. We have a lot to cover and shall jump straight to United States news. Biden team embraces fringe economic theory, embracing liberal wish list and fueling a massive debt. Namaskar and welcome to PGurus channels, Sridharji. What are your thoughts on what the Biden team is up to, sir?
Namaskar. Good morning to everybody on this wonderful, bright Thursday morning. What are they up to? It is becoming very clear that they are embracing an economic model, an economic theory, which means it doesn't matter what the economic realities are. Keep on pushing money into the system. Inflation doesn't matter. Debt doesn't matter. The economic outcome doesn't matter. So therefore, it's all progressive and liberal agenda. Hence, let's push more money. And I don't think this is going down very well. Only thing is, to be politically correct, Janet Yellen is riding with it, and the Fed led by Jerome Powell, is supporting with an accommodative policy. But the general perception is this is taking United States down an economic tube.
And 20 Democratic and Republican senators support a bipartisan infrastructure push for roughly 1 trillion without raising corporate taxes and taxes for the wealthy individuals, raising the prospects that there could be a deal in sight. Sir, how realistic is this? Because isn't Chuck Schumer trying something on his own, and isn't Biden trying to still stick to the 2.2 trillion number?
So the bipartisan team is trying to work to a process whereby, at least in the Senate, they can put this bill to test and perhaps get it through. Okay, that will then expose, should this be vetoed by the Schumer's approach of reconciliation, that there is a stark reality that the due governmental process doesn't matter anymore. Only the agenda matters. And come what may, they will use either reconciliation or executive orders to get this done. I believe this 20 Democratic, 20 total senators comprising of 10 on each side, coming up with a plan with a baseline of $565 or $600 billion for infrastructure, but giving a cushion up to $1.1 trillion, I believe is a good compromise. It also reflects that there is a support on either side. I think Schumer and the progressives are very clear. No one understands why this climate accord is, but they seem to be hell-bent, like everything else, immigration to funding to everything else. They would like to have their own way and move forward. So the prospects of a compromise looks very remote. Even if there is a compromise, the Democrats are hell-bent on pushing their way through their reconciliation process.
And in Texas, the governor commits $250 million down payment for his own version of the border wall and announces an online fundraiser. Governor Abbott also signs a law banning teaching of critical race theory in schools. Right from education to just about everything else, I get the feeling that something is being thrust down the throats of Americans. And why is this thing? Why can't the school district choose their own? Why is this being made a national theory? And again, we have had our questions on it, but there is a freedom about what you want to learn, isn't it, sir?
Well, there is this progressive agenda, which is backed by many NGOs and many entrepreneurs, such as, Mr. George Soros and of that ilk, which believe that they have to go towards some of the things that I've heard in California, which I don't want to, go mainline media with, is just horrible. The verbiage there's no mother, it is mothering. There's no father, there's fathering. All these kinds of terminologies that they want to bring about, I don't know what the agenda is, but it seems like that there's a tale of two cities here, or tale of two nations. One is the progressive agenda, which seems to be you have no choice, that will be pushed on your throat, pushed through your throat in the liberal states. Then you have the red states or the Republican states, which is systematically going one after the other, nullifying all these kind of contravenous schemes that the Democrats are coming up with. The border wall, 250 million, is a classic example. The border wall was approved. Then they got a judgment, which is to say, stopping the border wall is not illegal. So what Texas Greg Abbott is saying, okay, fine. Now I'll go and put my own money and build because my state is affected. So he's he's putting up the wall and he's going to get the funding. Number two, he said, I've got a problem. I don't have ICE that has been removed. Okay, the CBP is inactive. This Customs and Border Patrol. Okay, ICE is Immigration Control Enforcement. We don't have ICE. So I'm going to now call for police from my other red states, and they will come and restore the law and order. So Florida has come back and said, I'm going to send the police. You're going to see Louisiana, Nashville, and other states soon following the bill to restore the law and order and to come up with a bill. And also, as you pointed out, Abbott has banned the racial theory teaching in schools. So what you're seeing is this tale of two nations, one nation being going back to the conservative values, and the other nation, the other part, where you have the new Democrat. By the way, this hasn't happened in any of the prior Democratic setups. This seems to be hell-bent happening in under this particular regime. You have never seen such extraneous policies from the past Democrats.
And Michigan Senate passes bill to add voter ID requirements. Wisconsin joins other states to visit Arizona and learn about the audit process. Viewers, I can tell you that my book is going to ask a few uncomfortable questions of all these different processes that are in place currently. And stay tuned; it is coming to an Amazon portal near you. Your thoughts, Sridharji? Where is this thing headed? Why this special trip to Arizona?
Well, I think firstly, I think it's very good that Michigan State has passed the voter ID bill. So anybody who has to vote, that's a constitutional requirement, has to demonstrate that he has a valid ID to vote, contrary to the progressive beliefs. What is Wisconsin? Wisconsin is saying, oh, we have had Georgia visit, we have had Texas visit, we have had Florida visit, and now we should also go and see what's happening because a Pennsylvania visit. Remember, Pennsylvania's the Senate passed the resolution to nullify and to bring back the whole, and then the Democratic governor vetoed it. So similarly, Wisconsin is saying all these people have gone and seen the audit process. There's some interesting results, so we need to go and talk to them and find out. So Wisconsin joined. You're going to see most of the red states and maybe some sensitive or sane Democratic states also going and finding out the process of audit that went on in determining what happened in the counting of the votes in Arizona. It looks like many of the ballots which were invalid were also counted, and these things will be picked up as part of the process. Of course, you can read some of this in Sree Iyer's book as well.
And US charitable giving has hit a record 471 billion in 2020 amid the pandemic and economic turmoil. This is amazing because I see that inflation is rearing its ugly head and things that are normally at a certain price are beginning to, inch up. I would say 10 to 20% now, and a lot of things are not available. And therefore, it is stunning that so much money has been set aside for charity when you don't even have money for food. So, your thoughts?
My thoughts are this is a way by which the charity has been historically been funded. There are tax provisions within the charity. You can set up trusts. You can make direct contributions under 503C. So therefore, you have a number of provisions. Not surprising that there was a big economic boom in 2020 despite pandemic. Within 6 months, we recovered. The stock market had a bumper year last year. Not only the 401ks, but the personal wealth of a lot of people went up. So a good chunk of money has been donated to the charities. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to some of these provisions as the Biden administration now brings about these huge dole-outs that is going to be dished across the country. But it's a very good outcome because many of the charities, there's a lot of good charities, many of the charities are reliant on this precious funding. Remember, during the COVID, many institutions were shut down. So therefore, there was no income coming into many of the charitable institutions through other means. So therefore, this is I would call it as at least people have stepped up from the income and made their contributions towards the society.
And over 200,000 people have died of COVID in Biden's first 5 months in office. Recently, California, which was one of the first states to go into lockdown, has removed the restrictions. However, the state continues to stay in a state of emergency. It still mandates that you use masks wherever you are going to be in social gathering. So there are still a few caveats. But what is your prognosis on how COVID is progressing, and is a Delta wave in the offing in the United States?
There are essentially three components. First and foremost is the reason why we put up this number is Mr. Biden made his political campaign point that many people were deliberately being killed. He's the guy who is killing you. I've come in to protect. That was the provocative statement made by Biden, probably a speech written by someone else for him, very similar to the incorrect notes that were handed to him when he was standing up in front of people in Russia. So therefore, in his own tenure, he has seen. So people must recognize that the COVID deaths are caused by a pandemic. People make their best efforts. Doesn't matter whether it is Trump, or doesn't matter whether it is Biden, or doesn't matter whether it's Obama, or doesn't matter whether it is Clinton. They all are going to make their best efforts to protect and save the lives of the people. So therefore, the point is, under his own tenure, in 5 months, with a vaccine available, right, more than 200,000 people have lost lives. Now, to a second question, which is namely, how are we doing with the variants? There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, which is to say, you have one set of people saying the variant or the Delta variant or variant 3 is much more profuse in terms of its spread, but it is less damaging in terms of the effect of the toxic nature of the COVID. So one is expecting that having vaccinated, the impact can be better managed. Plus, the hospitals are more organized. Doesn't matter whether it is United States or elsewhere in the world, better organized. The only problem for outside of the main countries like United States and UK, and even for that matter, some of the European countries, and perhaps even India, many of the other countries don't have vaccines. You are beginning to see small countries with 50, 60 million population being highly impacted, especially in Asia. We don't have much data on Africa, but impacted as a result of the lack of vaccine. So vaccine is an absolute imperative. So to finally answer, which is to say, how are we doing? I think depending on which country are we talking about, it seems to be better managed. One good example is Japan, which are less than 1% of the population vaccinated out of that 126. They're ramping up their vaccines. Now they're saying they're going ahead with their Olympics. So therefore, which means that there is a level of confidence to deal with this issue on what is known. What is not known, we don't know. We'll soon see.
Sir, a Louisiana judge has handed down a ruling on the pipelines, and what are your thoughts on that? What is the impact? Is the Biden order to shut down Keystone Pipe, is that being reviewed now? What are the implications of this new order?
Very interesting. The Louisiana judge has passed, which is to say it's illegal through an executive action to block oil and gas leases. So all those things should be restored and move forward. The Interior Department is reviewing this judgment, and perhaps they may be forced to go back and get a resolution in the House through a specific majority. Only when it is done, then this can be implemented, and not through executive actions. Biden, when he took office, he unilaterally terminated the leases, including the Keystone Pipeline. Many of the people from the oil and mining industry have come up in arms, which is to say that this is nothing but a political rhetoric and political gaming. If, for example, Trump had an order which says all these leases should be cancelled, guaranteed Biden administration would have said, no, all these leases to be renewed, resumed and renewed. So it seems to be a political action rather than a genuine economic or genuine climate or environmental. This is the impression of the miners. You can go and Google and watch the interview of a couple of few oil miners making this specific observation. So I think that is to your question, final question, which is namely to say the internal security department is reviewing this order, and appropriate action will follow in the next few days or few weeks. But right now, the leases, at least in Louisiana, are back, and they are moving forward with whatever their plans are.
So what
That
are the
is
options? I'm sorry, sir. What are the options in front of the Supreme Court of the United States for the Biden administration? Will they challenge this decision in SCOTUS and hope for a favorable verdict and thereby overturn this again, or are they going to decide to just obey what the Louisiana judge says?
the Louisiana judgment is very specific, which is to say the executive action constitutionally is invalid. You have to get it passed through the House. So which one they're going to reverse? Are they going to say, the constitutional action is invalid, or are they saying the judgment needs to be reversed? So the question is, that is why they have to review it. And if they review, and if they get from their Department of Justice and other places an opinion, then they can contest it either in the same court, or they can take it to SCOTUS and get a different view. But I'll be very surprised if a judge has ruled, citing Constitution, as to who has the authority to make these provisions. So sometimes these rulings are made by the president orders, and often it gets reversed, and you find that the reverse becomes the reality rather than the original action. So let's wait and see.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. And viewers, I'm going to show you a video now, which perhaps captures a stunning similarity between what played out in the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack and how the narrative has been built up as if a variant of COVID originated in Mumbai. So with your permission, sir, I'm going to put a video, and this video kind of captures for you, the viewer, what has been happening in terms of where things started. I'm just going to pause it for a second so I can walk you over this. So this data that I'm presenting here has been given to me by an unnamed, a trusted source that has given us very accurate information in the past, but this source does not want to be named. Therefore, I'm just going to, and I'm not taking any names here, I'm just asking questions here. So the questions will have to be answered. I'm sure these answers will come in due course of time. First thing, what is DarkSide, the one that hacked Colonial Pipeline? DarkSide is believed to be a group of hackers that are spread over 3 different countries, some East European countries, North Korea, and China. Now, what happened is that, again, this is a surmise, a Chinese businessman who travels frequently between the US and China, he initiated this hack order or attack, saying that I will pay you so much money if you can successfully bring down the Colonial Pipeline. Again, this one, the money was put into the financial system of the world from a third country, which we do not know, or we don't want to state. My source didn't want to state which country it was. We know for sure it was not United States, it was not China. So some other country. From there, the money came into Cayman Islands. From there, it moved into Luxembourg. From there, into Russia. And at that point, the hackers were, given. So they had the money that basically they were being paid ahead of time for just doing this attack. Then the code was developed and released into Colonial Service, which is in the United States. And this happened. The place from where this thing originated is at a place which is on a border of Russia and an East European country. We don't know how this was found out, but we do know that something like this happened, because if you look at what happened after that, we had the FBI go back and recover, and I'm going to come to that in just one second. So what was the attack? What the attack did was it made it very difficult for the Colonial Pipeline computers to work. I mean, spread network was completely dead. It was not allowing people to even operate their basic computer accounts. Here's the second pipe. So Colonial was trying to restore from backups to the old backups so that they could continue But this virus essentially was so strong that it was fine, it was slowing down the restoration process. And finally, after trying everything else, again, this is, I'm just connecting some dots here. Colonial decided to pay the ransom, which was 75 bitcoins worth about $5 million. Now, as this was going on, the Federal Bureau of Investigation of the United States was trying to find out if there was any way they could recover this. And it turns out that they found a way to go to a wallet. They basically, impersonated, I guess, successfully as one of the hackers. And they went and found that there was an unclaimed set of Bitcoins in a particular wallet, and they emptied that. The amount that they recovered was not in the same range as 5 million, because what happens is once Bitcoin starts changing hands, the value starts eroding very quickly. They did get 63.7 Bitcoins, which is almost, they just lost about 10 or 12. Now, what has happened is, because when the tracing happened and people are starting to point fingers and they said, aha, the attack originated out of Russia. So this is the point. All this is, set it aside. Look at what the narrative is. The narrative is that it was perhaps done with the consent of the Russian government to try and put the Russian government under some sort of pressure. Now, so we don't know the exact truth here, but we do know that fingers were being pointed, that, dark side was indeed, it was being supported by some countries and so on and so forth. So basically questions are being pointed at Russia. Similarly, if you look at what happened in April of 2021, when the election campaign was in full swing in West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala, there was a second wave that was also called as double mutating virus, and this originated out of Mumbai. I mean, that's what they were saying, but essentially there is a hangout that you should watch that I had with Mr. R.V.S. Mani, where he asks people to look at some other compelling data that is emerging from a neighboring country which has been hostile towards India. So again, once this thing happened and Mumbai was in the grip of the second wave, a lot of deaths suddenly started happening, and Delhi also got into got caught on the same wave. So suddenly the narrative changed all over the globe. Suddenly they're saying this is the Indian variant. Now, this was again a way to try and say, oh, okay, the virus originated in India, it did not originate in China. Now we are seeing that many countries, see, once the second wave happened, India went into lockdown mode. In fact, even today, India is still in lockdown mode. You and I cannot fly to India unless there is an emergency, and only overseas citizens of India can fly to India, and that too only in some corridors. From US, yes, but not from many, many countries. Now what we are saying is, and Sridaji, you can back me up on this, there are news reports now coming of the same thing. Now WHO, in its infinite wisdom, changed the naming convention. They call the double mutant now as Delta. Now suddenly instances of Delta are showing up all over the world. Sir, this again goes back to prove that once the travel between India and other countries has been stopped, how did the Delta variant reach countries such as, I think, Vietnam, Thailand, or Singapore, and so on and so forth, some Asian countries, let's say? How did it get there? So these are all the questions that are being asked, and we hope that the truth will emerge in the days and weeks to follow. Sir, your thoughts on this, and then we can go on to Indian news.
Echoing similar sentiments to yours, Taiwan, which had almost nil and considered the better managed country, was the first to get hit. How it landed in Taiwan, it's an interesting proposition, which probably reaffirms the theory that you have laid out, or the observations and research that has been done by experts that endorses this propagation theory. As Sree ji mentioned, you should listen to the video or the fireside. I think the second is this what you call a whole set of rogue nations which seems to be colluding with a set of people, and that points to China with no clear, in no uncertain terms. China is the centerpiece villain in this whole Wuhan led virus, and China itself is facing the consequences. Unless and until the world confronts China and does a proper, independent, objective research and figures out a way by which this issue is tackled, this is not going to go away. This COVID is not going to go away, nor this mechanisms of transmission is not going to go away, because the information and news is very, very sketchy. So you have two major issues which Sree Iyer ji covered. One is the ransomware attacks, and that doesn't seem like it's going to go away. So which means from infrastructure to your daily living is going to be impacted. Then you have this whole propagation of COVID, which is also likely to pose a big challenge. And vaccines may be one cure, but how the world is going to deal with this is an interesting question.
And let's take a look at India-related news now. Prime Minister Modi-led cabinet approves 4,077 crores for deep ocean mission for exploration of ocean resources. Your thoughts on which areas are they targeting, and for over how many years is this 4,077 crores going to be used?
I won't be able to comment on the duration, but money has been set aside. Usually, when capital is set aside, then they run the specific account for a period of time. The objective is obviously the three things. One is the marine life. The second is because there's a lot of natural gas and oil exploration that is going on, and India is at the epicenter of trying to minimize as much as possible. So this is one of the domains that they would. The second is also that, as we have observed in South China Sea, what is the whole the fisheries and food industry, or the marine industry, marine farming industry. What are the consequences, and what's the consequences of the impact of this mining, etc., that would have on the marine ecosystem, which is not only the preservation of the environment, but also it feeds into the livelihood of many people. I mean, India is very big in in marine ecosystem as a food and fisheries type of industry. So therefore, I think the research is going to focus on some of these domains. And India is a big signatory to the EPA. So therefore, they don't want to do anything which affects the natural ecosystem.
Top Indian banks, including PSBs, that is public sector banks, are going to come together to implement blockchain technology for trade finance system. I have some inputs on this. Sir, your thoughts?
My thoughts are that this is one of the areas that they should have done long time ago. The experimentation happened in the United States. For whatever reasons, it has just not made its way further. SWIFT is usually, which is a payment network, is very actively engaged and involved in the trade finance system. So, look, anything requires standards, acceptance, and uniform deployment. Is the technology a disabler? No, the answer is no. It's more the governance and the operating and the business rules that makes or breaks any technology. That's my observation on trade and blockchain.
Sir, as part of a startup that I was involved with, it's the fintech startup, two and a half years ago, I got in touch with some really big wigs in some of the biggest banks in India, especially PSBs and private banks too. And after going through the presentation, everyone said, yeah, everything is, we are going to do this thing. But then after that, the banks dragged their feet, didn't decide one way or the other. I also contacted some of the leading providers of technology to these banks, and one such provider had something that they boasted that they had the solution, and basically, long story short, nothing ever happened. The banking industry in India is slow as molasses. They are perfectly happy collecting their little bit of money in the arbitrage of conversion from one currency to another. I don't see them doing anything quickly. They could have done this thing very quickly. In fact, I even approached their local branch in the United States and said, I can do a test transfer where you can just see how efficiently this thing works for remittances, and you can get a shot at the $80 billion remittances that happen into India from other countries. India has one of the largest workforce outside of India that remits regularly to India. It's about 80 billion a year, very, very huge number. But somehow things never got off the ground. Maybe they thought that this was not the top priority for them. I'm not going to blame anything. It's just that I just don't see how something like this is going to take shape and be used in a longer term, especially deploying. We saw that a simple thing such as automating of income tax forms has been stopped. Deployment got stopped, and now they are going back to manual filing. India is not easy to do anything. They should have taken the pilot project that we had suggested. It might still happen with somebody else. It's okay. We gave the idea. Sometimes people run with it. Whatever it is, we will be watching this and we'll be giving you the latest update. 43% of consumers did not buy any made in China products since Galwan attack, which just happened about a year ago. So this is a big change in the mindset of the average Indian, sir.
I think it's, you can see that people are patriotic. They do not want to be consuming products from a country that is threatening the sovereignty of the nation, which is, it's like saying, do not hurt the hand that feeds. So that's exactly what, the Chinese attempted to do. It's most of the consumption for the Chinese products is done by Indians. And so they came and, they decided to attack the sovereignty of the nation. And the Indians have responded. You may see more and more such behavior, especially if it is under the present administration. It begs the question, if there is an administration change, whether the same perception or just like the Indian variant and the COVID variant being named as an Indian variant. So there will be some such massaging that would happen or curation that would happen. And, people may do different. But at least now the Indians have risen to the occasion and boycotted. We'll get to, when we get to the world news, we'll come to a specific point on China as to why this thing is going to hurt China even more as we progress further in this journey. Yes, sir.
Sir, I will have to pick up the pace today because we are already 30 minutes into the program. Modi government plans 50,000 crores credit incentives to boost health infrastructure. Modi calls for repair and preparation of economy and health infrastructure. And Modi woos global tech investors to land about $1.2 billion, mobile phone manufacturing, addressing the Viva Tech event that just concluded in Paris. So your thoughts on this event, how effective it's going to be? In fact, already India is number 2 in terms of manufacturing of cell phones, isn't it?
It is. It's 1.2 billion phones rather than the dollars. He was addressing the Vivo Tech conference in Paris, which is a big, digital tech event, virtual summit. So obviously the focus is around, mobile. India is the home of mobile. It has surpassed United States. It's now, as you rightly point out, number 2. It won't be far off when it even replaces China, because Indians are very propensive consumers of mobile devices. Average person has maybe 3 phones at a minimum. Okay,
absolutely, sir. On a different day, I will tell you how the 3 phones are used. But let's go on to global news.
I'm happy. I'm happy with 1 phone, so that just takes care. I can't deal with more than 1 phone, but I'm happy with 1 phone. So I think. So let's move on. I think basically what India is doing is to say we have economy to focus. So therefore, probably they will do a stimulus or they will come up with some kind of a program. Health infrastructure is important if we have to combat wave 3 and future requirements. So therefore, the money is going to be directed towards those 2 programs. Of course, infrastructure and defense continues in parallel. So I think India seems to have at least got their right priorities. As you point out, it's all in execution of how you allocated capital gets executed so that the benefits begin to flow through much faster than anticipated timelines.
And in global news, another day, another government, but same action in Israel as Israel launches airstrikes in Gaza after incendiary balloon attacks. So this is something that we are hearing for the first time. What were these incendiary balloon attacks? Was this by, again, Hamas from Gaza, or was it a different group? Go ahead, sir.
It is an attack from the Gaza, and immediately Israel launched airstrikes to take out the sites from where these balloon attacks were being propagated. The objective is to show that it's not rockets coming, but it is this what you call benign balloons, which then happens to be loaded with other kinds of things. So that is with regard to the Hamas situation. And this is not the end. We're going to see now. Remember that Gaza and Palestinian territories, but mostly it is Gaza, is well funded. There's a lot of COVID money going to Gaza under the pretext of the redevelopment. Whether it is going to be redevelopment or whether it is going to be full frontal, we will know. And we also have a government which is a hodgepodge of people led by Naftali Bennett. How they are going to respond to these challenges that are likely to come up. Whether the government will collapse and Mr. Bibi will be back at the helm, we'll know soon.
Is the insane Biden plan to push for an Iran nuclear deal ahead of the Iranian elections the right course? One wonders, because right now there is a government, and I think the elections are just around the corner for Iran, and perhaps the current government wants to show this as a success so that they can get re-elected. What are the different parties that are fighting these elections? Is there a chance that a moderate would come back to power in Iran, sir?
Now, first and foremost, 6 rounds of discussions have taken place between the surrogate US as well as whosoever is the surrogate Iranian in Vienna. 6 rounds. So people are saying it's almost like, we want to reset the Obama administration policy and do a deal. Every person in the world thinks that this is most unwarranted set of actions. But Democrats would not have any bar of it, and they want to push forward. So whether Biden himself is controlling or whether there is a remote control controlling this agenda, one never knows. So that is on that. Why? There is no moderate. There is a very clear perception. There's a very clear indication, not perception, indication that a more provocative president is likely to win the election, and it is going to be even more harder to contain anything that is not containable as is right now. So their fear is to see whether you can get this is at least the Democratic fear that is led by the Biden administration, whether a deal would help. I don't believe that a deal would help. I think that they have to wait and see what happens. It's very clear that Iran does not abide by international norms and regulations. They have done what they had wanted to do. But remember, again, there's a lot of pro-Iranian groups in the United States who are now actively engaged in a policy. Whether that's going to help Iran or help the world, time will tell.
And this might be one of the legacies of the Biden presidency. But if you look at his record up until he became president, he was one of the more, regular Joes, average Joes, if you will. I'm sorry for the pun. That, he could be trusted. He was reliable. He was almost always looking for the good of the United States. But somehow this first 5 months has been like a hurricane after the other, coming and striking us. And we don't know how history is going to judge the Biden presidency, but there is certainly a lot more questions, a lot more surprising behavior on his part. I don't know how you think about it, sir, but I'm going to give you a chance to answer it after this next news item. After gaffes and acrimonies, Putin and Biden agreed to return ambassadors to respective venues and discuss cyber attacks. Lo and behold, here we go. This is what we talked about in the colonial pipeline plan. So your thoughts?
My thoughts are that this was a very disastrous summit. And you made a very interesting observation of Biden's Senate years. And he was known to be, notwithstanding the fact he had a flip-flops, but he was much more centrist in his views and approach. What has resulted in this big change? Probably the progressives are running the agenda. Also, we have to remember Biden is not advancing, is advancing in age. Many of the actions that you see, reflect a man who doesn't seem to be in good health. You do not go to 3 press meets and have a set of notes that has nothing to do with the press meet. Okay, just something is wrong here, right? Be it the Trump bashing, be it the preferential list of journalists, and we didn't play big in the interest of time. Be it his gaffe with the journalists, U.S. journalists at the post summit, all reflects that all is not well. And to affirm to echo your point, Mr. Putin himself says, "Hey, this guy is very timid and weak. His machoism is a fake. So therefore, I'm not going to listen to anything. This whole summit is unimportant. Why we are meeting, I don't know, but I'm happy to meet." Okay. And for Biden to hand over and say, "Here's 12 infrastructure areas that is off limits for your things, and rest of the places, that's okay." I mean, that's what I'm not suggesting that he's implying, but to say these 12 things will warrant an equal and disproportionate or unequal and disproportionate action from us, giving him 12 is a reflection of weakness, not a reflection of strength. In fact, Mr. Brennan, John Brennan, the national security of Obama years, has stated that Putin has figured out that Biden is fairly weak, knows very little on foreign policy, and he's a wily man. He was an ex-head of KGB, and I think it for the first time it to me showed United States in a very, very, very soft and poor light.
And China's defense minister, Zhen Weifeng, told United States, Japan, and ASEAN leaders that it will not, when it comes to Taiwan, give even an inch, and as well as with respect to South China Seas and other core interests. It's basically saying that we are going to continue doing what we are doing. So this is again saber rattling, but we are also seeing, like we said yesterday in our hangout, that there is an island which is closer to the mainland China than Taiwan, and perhaps that is where the first action in terms of China trying to occupy it might happen. And do you think this statement by the defense minister of China sort of adds more fuel to the fire?
Well, there is no fear. You see, the thing is, both Russia and China have collided. We have shown the photograph and we have made the comment. To me, this is the most provocative statement that we have seen from China in an international meet. An international meet where you had defense ministers of ASEAN plus 10 other countries, including US, India, Japan, Korea, etc., including, right? So where the defense minister of China, Mr. Weifeng, has stated, we're not going to accept what you say. We're going to move forward. Had it been there was no leadership, but it's also a provocative statement. This is my call. In the absence of Trump, the person who is going to take China head on is India. I don't see any other nation, either in the neighborhood or in the near vicinity, taking on China. China is going to attempt this on India, on Indian borders, LAC and so on, including CPEC. And I think India is going to take this thing head on, as they did in Doklam, as they did in Galwan, as they did across the LAC. I think India is going to be the country which probably for the first time will say, okay, enough is enough. Okay, come what may, we'll tackle. And there are some countries like France, UK, Japan is weak. Japan, Suga is every day struggling to be in power after Abe. But this is a big issue for the world to wake up to the reality, the vacuum of United States. There was US, but there was no United States in the meet yesterday.
G7 and Communist Party has no chemistry, and its communist command and control model offers no viable compromise. Sir, who said this thing and in what context?
Basically, what is happening is this is an independent and objective analysis from a bunch of Asian commentators. You had the G7 meet. China dismissed the G7 meet as a bunch of small nations trying to usurp. China has never attempted to patch up with G7, has never wanted to be part of G7. And so therefore, notwithstanding the fact it is the second largest economy, it has got a stabilizing power both by way of currency as well as by way of trade, but yet it is not part of it. So this prompts people to say Communist Party has no mechanism to work on a consensus basis across nations. It can only work on a consensus basis as far as choosing the CCP leader is concerned. Even that is going to be tested. Mr. Xi Jinping passes 68. 68 is the age limit for a leader. Whether the CCP will abide by that, and or whether they will basically say, "Oh, Mr. Xi Jinping, you're a lifelong leader," we will see it. So the independent commentators are saying, if you're trying to bring China in to a consensus-building approach, you have no hope. That is the reason why they either my way or no way is their way.
And let's quickly look at the markets before we come back. We wrap up this program. So yesterday, the Fed finished its meeting and it signaled that there could be a double hike in 2023, accepting the fact that there is a rise in inflation. And I'm also going to read one other news item and then you can comment on both. Yellen confirms that inflation will be higher than the Biden administration's expectations. So looking at this, what should the average investor expect? Yesterday, of course, there was a stock market correction. Going forward, do you think the market will catch its breath and then come back again? What are your thoughts, sir?
I think 2021, we have answered the question. The market is on a growth momentum because the economy is on the mend and the recovery. So it's called as the recovery economics, pent-up demand, etc. We have already seen rentals go up in United States more than anywhere in the world. So therefore, the inflation is up with regard to United States is concerned. India has also seen uptick in inflation. Some of the Asian countries have seen the uptick in inflation. All Asian countries will be impacted when the Fed rate is announced. Fed has effectively indicated 2023. So people, you can begin to see pricing built into the currencies and the flight of the dollar away from the outside the world back into the United States. 2022, once we have a much more defined data as we get to end of quarter, 2022 will be much more modest than 2021. I think we'll begin to see the signs of fatigue in 2023. I think there is no way that the rate hike simply implies that you go back to value rather than growth. So people will become conservative. So there will be a shift in allocation, and there will also be a shift in the percentage of allocation with the rise in rates, more money going towards the fixed income type of stocks.
And that brings us to a close of today's Daily Global Insights. We'll be back again bright and early tomorrow. Thanks for watching and namaskar.
Thank you. Namaskar. Have a good day.